It's time for a new electric guitar build. I've got a guitar show I'm going to be attending in about a month or so, so I guess that means I can't let this thing sit around any longer. Let's do this. What's going on? Welcome back to my workshop. I hope your day is going great. Yes, in about a month or so from the time of recording, I'm going to be attending a guitar show in Denver, Colorado. I've got a few instruments that I plan on taking up there, but I want to have something new. As I was looking around the shop, basically taking an inventory of the materials that I had on hand to build this new instrument from, I came across this body that I'd set aside about 2 years ago. This is a mahogany and quilted maple Haley Guitars Dorian body that I never completed. And I couldn't remember exactly why. At first I thought maybe it was because I got some tear out in the neck pocket area, but that's gonna all get routed away once I cut the neck pocket. It wasn't until I grabbed my template and began to get things lined up to cut the neck pocket and the pickup cavities that I remembered why this body got set aside. If we take a look at the center lines, which everything is based off of, you can see that the center line of my template lines up with the center line of the mahogany body, but the center line of the top is almost 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch off. That means the top slipped while I was gluing this together, and that's why I set this body aside. While I believe that I could probably complete this instrument as is, and structurally there would be absolutely nothing wrong with it, but when it came down to inspecting the fine details, which is something that I like to look at, especially on instruments like this that you're building from scratch, I want everything to line up exactly. I'm sure you'd be able to notice, especially in the area of the bridge, that the center line doesn't line up with the string spacing once everything's assembled and the guitar's strung up, and that would drive me crazy. So we can't leave this as is. So how do we move forward from this unfortunate mishap? Well, the only way I know is to retop this mahogany. So we're gonna get rid of this quilted maple, and I've got another set of quilted maple here that I'm gonna use to make a new top. It'll be like nothing ever happened. Only this time, we'll make sure nothing slips around.
Now there's a bunch of different ways you could use to remove a top from a guitar body, but for me, the easiest method is just to run this thing through the drum sander until the top has been turned into sawdust. I know, it's sad, but it's what we're gonna do.
Goodbye, old quilted maple top. Now, we've just got a little bit of cleanup here. You can see that I had some weight relief holes in here, which is kind of helpful to have the top removed because since it's been a couple of years since I did this, I wasn't exactly sure where these were. I knew they were around here somewhere, but now we know for a fact. There's our little paper thin veneer. That's all that's left. This was over the control cavity. Of course, when we put a new top on, that's all going to be covered up, and no one will ever be the wiser, except you, and you, and you.
I'm going to sand just a little bit around the edge of the weight relief holes in the control cavity. This is just to make sure that there's no little burrs or anything sticking up that could keep the top from sitting flush.
Everything feels nice and smooth. Now we just need a top. After inspecting this piece a little bit, trying different ways, checking out the book match, I think this is the orientation that I want to use. We just need to joint that edge so we can glue it up. I'm going to do this just like I would for an acoustic guitar using my shooting board. Since this is figured, if I run this on the jointer, there is a chance that the weird grain in figured wood could cause some weird tear out, so I think this is the safest way to do it. It's actually pretty close already.
To fine-tune that glue joint, I'll use a sanding beam to make sure everything is perfectly smooth. The glue joint's looking good. I'm ready to glue this top together.
Just let that dry for a little bit.
With the body placed on the top, I'm going to carefully line up my center lines and trace out roughly the outline of the guitar so that I can trim away the waste material. By trimming away this material, it's not only going to make it easier to work with, but I'll be able to get my clamps closer to the outside perimeter of the guitar. That way I know I get good clamping pressure.
And after a couple of light passes through the drum sander with some 220 grit, there's our new top. We're ready to glue this on. Only this time, we're going to make sure that it doesn't slip around. And now I can use some toothpicks as kind of makeshift alignment dowels to help hold everything in place. The reason I like wooden toothpicks is because I don't have to worry quite as much about removing them before the glue sets up. If these things get glued in place, since it's in the neck pocket in a pickup cavity, I'm going to route that all away anyway. It's not going to damage the router, and it's still going to hold the top in place. I've set everything up to glue the top on. I'm working on a little stand really just to lift it up. That way I can get some clamps in there. I've got a backer board so that I don't dent the mahogany. Clamps are all laid out. I've got a bunch of cauls ready to go. All it's missing is some glue. All right. I think that's like all the clamps. Not quite, but a good chunk of them anyway. I'm going to let this thing dry overnight. After running this on the router table, everything's flush. I got quite a bit of burning from that bit. I thought it was sharp enough, but apparently it's getting dull and is in need of replacement. So aside from a little extra sanding we're going to have to do, we're now back to where we started with this body originally. The only difference is now the center lines line up and I'm comfortable moving forward on this project.
Before attaching my routing template, I'm just going to trace the center line to make it easier to see, and then I'll attach the template using a bunch of double-sided tape. At the drill press, I'll use a Forstner bit to remove the bulk of the material in both the pickup cavities as well as the neck pocket. I also drilled the holes for the controls as well. By removing the excess material for the neck pocket and the pickup cavities at the drill press, it saves a lot of wear and tear on your router, and especially the router bit, as the router bit doesn't have to work quite so hard when you route the cavities to their final depth.
Neck pocket and pickup cavities? Check. Now we sand. Ugh.
I decided to add a couple of access carves to the back, so I'll just quickly pencil in roughly how I want them to look, and then remove that material with a rasp. With the carving complete, I can now add a small 3/16 roundover to both the top and the back of this guitar body. This is a really slight roundover, but I think it makes a huge difference in the feel of the body when you're playing. Next up, I'll use a Forstner bit to drill a slight recess in the body. This will accommodate the output jack. From there, I'll use a long 5/16 drill bit to drill several passageways that I'll be feeding wiring through later on.
So here's our body with most of the woodworking complete. The only thing that I have to do is to drill the recesses for the neck grommets, but I'm not going to do that yet because now I want to apply some grain filler to this mahogany, and experience has told me that those recesses will tend to get clogged up, especially if you're not careful with grain filler. So I think it's easier to grain fill everything now, then I can drill these recesses later. Plus, I'd like to have the neck to double check everything before I start drilling holes. I don't know why, just how my brain works. This time around, I'm using some Aqua Coat grain filler. We're just gonna smear it on this mahogany using a rag. You can apply it with a bunch of different things, but I find the easiest is a rag. Just smear it on there, make sure it's worked into the grain. We'll probably do this 2, maybe 3 times to get the grain filled so that when it comes time to finish this thing, it's nice and smooth. I think the worst thing about grain filler is the fact that you got to sand it back off. And you guys know how much I enjoy sanding. The good side is it really only takes a half hour to an hour to dry before we can move on. So it doesn't take all that long. I'll probably spend more time sanding than it takes to apply the next coat. I'm all dusty now. Well, I've got the body sanded up to 320. I need to apply and sand another coat of grain filler, but I think we'll stop this video here because, well, really, it's just going to be repeating the same stuff. In the next episode of this guitar build, we're going to start working on the neck, possibly, if we get far enough, get into the finishing process. Hope you enjoyed this reclaiming, if we can call it that, a mahogany body by putting a new top on there. We've got it all pretty much sanded, ready to go. Thanks a lot for watching. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button as well if you're not already subscribed to the channel, so that way you get notified when the next episode of this build comes out. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time.